Hi, I'm Chris Mills, the creator of LeanPeaks, the no-code software entrepreneurship platform made for Excel users. If you're good with Excel formulas, you should use LeanPeaks to make tools that people will love to use, bringing in lots of income for you. LeanPeaks is all about applets. An applet is a piece of software that performs calculations for a user and presents the results. An applet has two components: a front end that the user sees and interacts with, and a back end that performs the calculations for them. A creator makes an applet using a point-and-click user interface designer to figure out the layout and components, and a demo Excel file with formulas demonstrating the calculation that they want the back end to perform. Here's a super simple example with 3 units: a number field, the run button, and a metric output. I can put a number in here, maybe 5. I press run, and I get the answer 6. I can increment this a few times. I hit run, and I get 9. It's adding 1 to the number. It's doing that because this Excel file is the demo file I provided when I created this applet on the right. It's got cell B5 with a number, and cell C5 with the formula equals B5 plus 1. When I created the applet, I said that this input unit is associated with cell B5, and this output unit is associated with cell C5. So LeanPeaks figured out, okay, this is the operation that we need to perform. Now I'll show you how quickly this applet can be created, and then move on to a more interesting example. I go to the workshop, I clear all units, delete all. I go inside the inputs frame. I add an input unit. It's a number. Destination reference B5. Demo input for a label. It's a field. Step size of 1 will do. And it looks okay. I insert it. I exit the inputs frame. I add an output metric. Label demo output, enter. Value to display is blank, but I give it cell reference C5. It looks okay. I insert it. In the studio, everything looks fine. I hit the build button. I will pick an uploaded file, add one, and it's done building the back end. I proceed to the test lab. There we go. Moving on, we have a kind of Canadian city populations dashboard. I've got a couple of input sliders, the run button, an output table, a bar plot or a bar chart, and an interactive map. So these are the Canadian city centers, and varying all the way from Toronto having a population near 5 million to tiny communities having very few people. You might notice that the vast majority of the Canadian population is huddled near the United States and along the southern edge of the country because northern Canada is very cold. That's just kind of a fun fact. But we can restrict it to just the high population by setting the minimum to about 1 million. And now we just have 3. We've got Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. And that's all we've got on our map. And then if we reduce this a bit, several more will pop in. Now we've got Ottawa, as well as Edmonton and Calgary. And we can flip it very much the other way. I run it again, and now we just have a very large number of cities with a pretty small population of 45,000 or less. And we've got them in our table. And here they are, scattered across the country. You might notice there's varying colors. I'll explain why, or I'll show you how this was done, but the latitude, so how far north or south the city is, determines the coloration that you see here. Ones that are very light are furthest south, and ones that are blue are furthest north. Okay, let's show how this was made. But I'm going to show you that in light mode. So we've got a settings up here in the three dots, and from there you can switch from a system setting to specifically light or dark. I usually prefer it dark, but let's work in light for a while. Let's create it totally new. I'm going to go to my assets space, and I will create applet. Start out as blank. Live map demo. Tags map demo live. You can put anything you like to help when you're searching in the table in the future. Description live map demo. Save. I would like to load version 1 so that we can work on it. And so we have started out Scratch, and I'm going to switch now to my live map demo. There we go. So I don't have any demo files associated with this applet yet, but I will later when I upload one, as you'll see. I've got just version 1 in my versions table over here. Going to the workshop, I have nothing. In the studio, I've got just my run button. Inside the inputs frame, everything is gone. Let's go, actually before we go in the inputs frame, let's add that title. It is a static unit. We could do images or audio or video. These are all considered static because they're not changed by the calculations. That makes them static. I'll give it a title, and I'll call it live map, live cities map demo. That's okay. I insert it. Now I've got my title here above the inputs frame. Going to the workshop, I go inside the inputs frame where I will add my input number. I have to show you my Excel file. In cell E2 and F2 are my two input values. This is where the sliders have to correspond to. So I'll give a cell reference of E2, and a label is min population. It is a slider, which requires some more detail. For step size, 1 is fine. You'd want to use something else. Like, let's say that you're doing dollar amounts and you want to allow somebody to specify down to pennies, down to the cent. Then you would use 0.01. And that specifies that all amounts have to be this size or bigger. And if I put a number down here, 4.579, that gets rounded off to the nearest penny because of what I've set this to. So if I have this at 1, it's limited to integers. So that finer amount got rounded off to 5. I'm going to have a starting value of 50,000 because that matches the value in the Excel file, which is kind of nice because I'm going to put default data in those visualizations. The minimum allowed value is 0. Maximum allowed, I'm using 5 million. And I get a preview of my slider. I can test it out. I'll input it. Now I like to keep all of my units expanded with this toggle, and that way they all show the details. I'm going to copy this and paste it. So to show that one more time, I can copy a unit and then paste it anywhere I like. And those plus buttons change to a little clipboard button to show that instead of adding, you are pasting. And then you can cut and move it maybe down to a whole new row, or cut it again and put it above the run button. This is how you move units around, is the cut and paste. But that's all we need to show of that. I'm going to delete this excessive one. Now the min population that I created here, I'm going to edit that to max population. The cell reference here is F2, because in my Excel file, it's this cell, not that one. And this cell has coordinate F2. And that is what is used in the formulas, are these two cells that are used in that formula, which passes the data onto this formula and onto this. So our formulas that are at work are just applying these conditions, changing the population to 0 whenever it's outside of this range. And then here we're using a filter function to select just the appropriate data. So only a subset of the data makes it over here. And then only some of the data is showing up in our external table, the output table. So that's why I've got it set aside yet again, because we don't need the point size column within our output table. So anyways, this is F2. So we come back, that's F2. Slider, these are all fine. I'm just going to change the starting value to be 3 million. And I do that just because then this will match the example data that we put. I go to my studio and I see both of my sliders have been added. Now this is a lot bigger than it needs to be. So I'm going to come down and turn on the widths. Now I can see the width of each of these. And I'm going to change this from 1 to 0 to 0.3. Now the run button is much smaller, and these are much larger, which I think helps, especially if you're down here in the small numbers. It gives you a bit more granularity. So now that this is small, I'm going to hide the widths. And now we're back to the way that the user will see it. So I've got my title, my input slider, my other input slider, and the run button. Let's go back up to the workshop and start adding our outputs. So I exit the inputs frame, and I will add a new row. I'm going to put an output table. The range reference for our table is O5 through Q54. And while I'm at it, I'm going to copy this data. Table O5 through Q54. And I'm going to call this population and latitude, longitude. I'll apply the column name change. Okay, now in optional details, I'm going to paste that data that I hit Control C over here in Excel. Now I'm coming back, clicking the upper left, and Control V to bring all of that data in. I apply my data edits, and now in the preview table, I see that there's data. I think the dimensions are fine, so I'm not going to make any other changes there. And this unit is ready to go. In the studio, I see that I now have an output unit with columns for population, latitude, and longitude. The convenient thing is I can take this, copy it, paste it, and now turn it from a table into a chart. It's going to be a bar chart, and it remembers the attributes that it already had. I can just specify that I want population to be a Y column. So I've got my heights here. And in optional, I can specify that I want there to be colors. I'm going to say a column name, and I'm going to specify latitude, which is how far north or south it is, because I think that makes it a little bit more interesting. This one here, that's got to be Edmonton because it's much darker, so it's further north. And this one's probably Calgary. Going down, I will apply these changes. That's everything that I need to make here. And now in the studio, beside our table, we've got our bar chart. Now all that remains is to add the map. So going into the workshop, in yet another row, I'm going to add an output map. It's basic type. Right now, basic is the only option, but in the future there will be more. The range reference here is going to be K5 through M54. And I will copy that. K5 through M54. And I don't have to make these nice anymore. I'm going to call this size and lat and long, because these don't get shown to the user. So I don't have to be as picky with the names. So it's asking for the latitude values and the longitude values. Okay, and it's not showing anything because it has no data. I'm going to paste in my default data that I copied in from Excel. So I've pasted it here. I apply the data edits, and now we have points. But you'll notice that they're all the same size, no differences in size, because I've got to go to point size and indicate it's a column name that it determines size. It's the size column that determines size. That's what we want. But red is a little bit alarming maybe. So let's customize the color from red to a nice green. And now that's applied. The other thing is, and let's zoom in a little bit to make this more obvious, is you can change the transparency. By default, it's about half. But if we reduce the transparency, it'll become much brighter. And if we crank up the transparency like crazy, stuff is very faintly colored. The advantage of this is that you can see through in quite high detail. And incidentally, you can get very, very high resolution detail down to individual streets. So you're not limited to doing data visualizations at the national level. You can do data visualizations for particular sites within your city. Maybe restaurant reviews, or average property value by city block. If you have access to that level of data, you can build visualizers for anything of that kind. Let's bring our transparency back to about half and zoom out on our map. Insert it in the applet. Going to our studio, we now have all the components that we were looking for. So it's time to build it. This has been quite a bit in light mode. Let's switch back to dark mode. So now we see it in dark mode. In particular, I prefer the map in dark mode. I find the white map to be a little bit overwhelming, and I think that the colors are much more interesting against the dark background. So now that it's time to build it, let's hit the build button. I do have to close my Excel file before I can upload it. I'm going to close it even though there's a bunch of stuff on the clipboard. That's okay. I will build. It knows what my inputs are. I browse. I choose the Excel file. It is extracting all of the data and formulas. It has built the back end. It has saved it. And we can proceed to the test lab. Now we're down here in the test lab where we can try running it. I'm going to drop the min to 0 and ramp the max up to 5 million. There we go. A little bit of a delay on that one. And we've got our full range from 4.5 million down to very small amounts. We can scroll in our table here, and the plotting library that's used for this allows for interactive examination. So I can just grab a chunk and zoom right in on it. Maybe I want to look at all of these ones of sort of medium size, varying from about 100,000 up to about 1 million, or I can zoom right back out. I can also make this take up the whole window, and we've got a really long tail of cities that have like 5,000 people, tiny ones, 6,400, many. It's a long tail of this distribution. Let's close the full screen, and you can do that with the map as well using this button. Okay, that's how to produce this. I hope you found this informative. There's a whole lot of different options. There are scatter plots, bar plots, line plots, area plots, or charts if you prefer that term, as well as the interactive maps. There will be a marketplace allowing creators to earn revenue on a per-use basis. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned and try it out at leanpeaks.app.